Good morning. Welcome into Five Clubs. Great to have you with us on this Monday morning, live on a Labor Day. I am Gary Williams. Great to have you with us here on Golf Channel. And this program is brought to you by Century Insurance, right by you. They invest in the game of golf in wonderful ways with the United States Golf Association, the first team. We're very proud that they present for us as our presenting sponsor here. We have three great North Carolina-based companies, starting with Golf Pride when it comes to all the options and the quality of the materials. There's no reason why you would not choose Golf Pride through your bag for all of your grips. Peter Millar, down to this Bingham little performance sport coat, they've got you covered. The fall line is available now at petermillar.com. Go there today. And then finally, the Cradle of American Golf. I know that they will be busy today on all 10 of their golf courses, and Pinehurst number 10 has their new clubhouse, their new restaurant, Station 21. There's always a good reason to be booking a trip to Pinehurst. It is Labor Day, and we're going to labor. Now, this is not breaking rocks. We work in the toy department, and I think about some of my favorite places on a Monday morning on a Labor Day, the end of summer, whether it is Watch Hill, Rhode Island, or Leland, Michigan, or Sea Island, Georgia, or Valentine, Nebraska. Breathe it all in, because the kiddies are going back to school. That means carpools, that means less golf, but today we talk golf because we're going to lead you to something that is significant, and that is Luke Donald's 6 captain selections that he will make at 2 p.m. local time where he is, 9 o'clock Eastern time here in the United States. Brendan Porath is going to join me from Fried Egg Golf. Of course, he's the head of content. Brendan and I have had conversations about this process going back to the first week of the year here on Five Clubs. And then we're also going to be joined by Rob Lee, a guy who won a couple times on the DP World Tour / European Tour. He's been a contributor at Sky Sports. His perspective, the European perspective, and like I said, this is about Europe. Last week, it was about Keegan Bradley and his 6 captains picks, of which there was some uncertainty, certainly starting with him, whether he was going to pass on himself or whether he was going to insert himself into that United States lineup. And my intuition, end of the show on a Wednesday, I said, I think he's going to pass, and he did. Now it's Luke's turn, and we think that there is going to be very little, if no surprise. We'll get into what we think might be the one little wrinkle that might alter this particular lineup to just a modest degree, because he may be doing something and is likely going to be doing something that has only been done once. And if he does go with 11 of 12 from Rome, we're in uncharted territory, because I reached out to Justin Ray, who is the machine when it comes to giving you information historically, when it comes to factoids or data. And yesterday morning, I'm thinking about, when was, or has there ever been another time that either a United States captain or a European captain took 10, and maybe in this case 11 guys from the previous team, brought the band back together for the next Ryder Cup? And I know that he was enjoying his Sunday of Labor Day weekend. I asked him that question about 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern time yesterday morning. At 9 o'clock last night, he responded. He said, Gary, 1971, the team from Great Britain and Ireland, before Europe was added in 1979, 10 of those 12 guys participated in 1973. The result was the same. They got blitzed by the United States, which was what was the result virtually every single time these two teams got together. That's one of the reasons why there was the impetus driven by Jack Nicklaus to add Europe, as they did at the Greenbrier in 1979. So 10 of 12 has been the only time that either side has brought that many guys from a previous Ryder Cup to participate the following time. It seems a certainty that Luke Donald is going to do just that. And look, I'm going to share some information that the team has been working on to give you an idea of why things have been the way that they've been. But let me just say before that, I think the European Ryder Cup team, the franchise, and this is tricky because we don't associate team with golf. We do this once every 2 years in this competition. And if you add whether it be the President's Cup on the women's side, you have the Solheim Cup on the amateur side, you have the Curtis Cup, and of course this week the glorious Walker Cup that is going to be contested at Cypress Point. But we don't have team golf really, for all intents and purposes, in elite professional golf. But I believe that the European Ryder Cup system, the franchise, is one of the great teams that we have had in all of professional sports for more than 3 decades. If you look at what they've done since Europe was added in 1979, and just more specifically, if you look at that, first of all, this reminds me of Duke Carolina. If you're unfamiliar with how close that rivalry has been all time, it's bizarre. 295.5 to 292.5, Europe leads in total points since 1979. That's ridiculous. So we've seen this rock fight that we've been watching now for almost 4 decades, or more than 4 decades, and we have evidence that shows you over the last decade it hadn't been particularly close because the home teams have dominated. But there are many reasons, and I'll get to one specific one in a moment. I think that Europe, it's not about how they care so much more, but they have this sense of understanding about giving in to the other guy, and I mean to their teammates, and making sacrifice. And I've said this before on this program, that my dad imparted upon me when I was a kid. You know what? There's no greater feeling, there's no greater reward than collective achievement. The European Ryder Cup system, they embody that. And after Rome in 2023, and Justin Rose has an eloquence about him that is very redeemable, he said, this is our time. But we have a responsibility to those who came before us and those who are going to come after us, because we are not here just for ourselves. We are here for this system. We are here for the men who built what we have, and we are here to maintain what we have for those who are going to come after us. And I think that those players feel that. That's why in this century alone, they're 8-3 in this competition. And if you look at the ills, the challenges, the failures that the United States has had trying to win on the road, having only done it once, one time since 1981, they won on the road, and that was 1993. Converse that, or just put that up against what Europe has done. Europe, starting in 1983, when it took Lanny Watkins' wedge and a bolt of lightning simultaneously to get a halve and secure a win at Palm Beach Gardens, and then the next time it came to the United States, Europe won. And that was off having won at home in 1985. And then they won again in 1995. And then they won again on U.S. soil in 2004. And then they did it again in 2012. Europe has won at least one time, and only once, in every decade. The 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. The United States, one measly road win, 1993 at the Belfry. So it's a lot of stuff. But one of those things, and Luke Donald's going to make his picks coming up in less than an hour right here on Golf Channel, is that they've picked the right guys to fill out these rosters. So let's just look at what the European captains' picks have done going back just before this century, 1999. That, of course, was at Brookline. That included Sergio Garcia as a 19-year-old precocious kid. And you look at that, most of the years, those captains' picks have produced in total winning records. Yes, they've had some losing records. Oddly, in 2014, when they boat raced the United States at Glen Eagles, their captains' picks were 2-5-2. 60, 46, and 15 since 1999. And we've had 2 picks, we've had 3 picks, we now have half the roster that make up the captains' picks for Europe. And look at that compared to the United States, 53, 64, and 24. So that is one indication of these captains, and you can go back, and whether it is 2002, 2004, whether it's home or on the road, they've made good choices. And those captains' picks have delivered. And one of the other things that Europe has going for them is institutional knowledge among the players who are part of these teams that are 8-3 in this century. They have the experience of winning. They have the institutional knowledge of what it feels like, what it takes to get it done. So if you just look at the guys who are going to represent this team that we already know who are on this team, starting with Rory McIlroy, who showed up at Celtic Manor in 2010 and said, I don't know. Exhibition, right? And then he got swallowed up by the pageantry and the grandiosity of it all and went, oh my, I don't like this. I live for this. Look at these 5 guys. Rasmus Højgaard, who was the other automatic qualifier because of what he did at the Betfred British Masters, is making his first appearance. Justin Rose, 14-9-3. Rory, 16-13-4. Tommy. And Tyrrell Hatton and Bob McIntyre had his first baptism, and only baptism, in 2023. So they have the experience of the guys who are already on this team of having winning records and winning records individually, but the experience of winning more than once. And several of those guys have experienced winning on the road. Rory and Justin Rose have done it. And then you get to the overall experience, knowing that we feel comfortable putting the 2 guys on that bottom row there, in Jon Rahm and Matt Fitzpatrick. They're lead pipe mortal locks to be on this team. And so you look at Rory with 8, and now Rose with 7, and Fleetwood and Hatton, they're 4th teams. And this will be John's 4th. And Matt Fitzpatrick, even though he has a losing record, he has the experience in total of experience what it's like to win. So you couple that or counter that with the United States team. And now look, I will tell you that I don't think inexperience for the United States is that bad of a dynamic, because when you're ushering out losing experience, why not give guys without the scar tissue of losing to insert them into this environment? Justin Rose is the only guy who is making his 4th appearance, and you look at the European team, half their team will have as much experience as Justin Rose. And again, I'm going to get back to what I said before about it's one thing to have experience, and here's the thing about the United States in this century. Whether it's Steve Stricker or Jim Furyk or Davis Love, and these are wonderful players, but their collective experience was overwrought with a lot of experience in losing. So it's not all a bad thing. Now, here is one of the things that Europe, as they embark upon this, and one other thing when I mentioned 85 and 87, when Europe did the back-to-back, the only time it's ever been done. And interestingly enough, when they won in 1985, they won by a margin of 5 at the Belfry, to then come to Muirfield Village in 1987, captained by the man himself, yes, Jack Nicklaus, and they won on American soil for the first time, and Jose Maria Olazabal did his own Spanish jig on the 18th green. Tony Jacklin was the captain, British gentleman himself. Luke Donald, British. He is taking a 5-point victory in the previous Ryder Cup, and he's bringing the band back together to try to validate the skin on American soil to become only the 2nd European captain to go back-to-back at home and on the road. But here's what he's swimming against, and it's a hell of a current. It's a riptide in terms of what they got to deal with when they come to the United States, because even though the United States has struggled on the road, there's no doubt, but when they come to the United States, what they have felt is not only winning, but even Europe, when they're at home, here's what we have. We're in a decade of epic blowouts. Blowouts, all of them. The last time we had a highly competitive Ryder Cup was when we were on the verge of another blowout. There was a blowout in 2008. It wasn't. It was a close one in 2010 at Celtic Manor. 14, 16, 18, 21, and 23. These things have not been close. And that's why I also believe that the Ryder Cup, of all things, with all the sports, and you look around the college football landscape on Saturday and Sunday and Monday, and it was great to see Miami lathered up last night in Death Valley on a Saturday night. That didn't work out particularly well. Or the shoe on Saturday as well. That weirdly, golf now possesses one of the most challenging home field advantages in sports. And one of the reasons why is because the place gets just unhinged. They don't meander into this environment with the noise and the atmosphere. It's full-throated from the first tee. So here's what Luke Donald and the team that he will complete coming up in 45 minutes when he starts to roll out these captain's picks, is that getting behind has been a very, very tall order. Such a tall order that hasn't resulted in anything. The last 4 Ryder Cups on U.S. soil, day one. Look at what has happened to Europe. They've been blitzed by the United States. Valhalla, 2008, Medina. Now, they came back. They were actually down 10-4 late on Saturday, and then it was 10-5, and then it was 10-6, and then it was the epic comeback. And then 2016, they were down 5-3. And then 2021, 6-2. And it was run it up, Herman, leave no doubt. Remember the Titan style. The last 4 U.S.-hosted Ryder Cups, the United States has had an overwhelming advantage after day one. And they know what Bethpage is going to be. It is going to be a cauldron of noise. Not dissimilar from the others, but I think to a level maybe we've never seen before. So that's why Luke Donald and what we expect him to do by making the selections he's going to make makes it even more interesting, because it's the same crew for all intents and purposes. We take our first break. When we come back, we've talked about this with him from the beginning of the year, and now here we sit where we know in about, less than an hour's time, we're going to know the 12 on 12 we're going to get. Brendan Porath, head of content for Fried Egg, his thoughts on where he thinks we're headed, also why Europe has what they have. Does Rory have to be Rory Rome for them to win? And a lot of other questions to ask of him. And then Rob Lee from Sky Sports, the European perspective. And again, top of the hour, Luke Donald's captain's picks right here on Golf Channel. We're live on a Labor Day, and we ain't laboring. It's golf. We're back with Brendan right after this. Back in live on a Monday here on Golf Channel. This is 5 Clubs, and this segment is brought to you by Golf Pride. When it comes to grips and choices through the bag, all the way through that reverse taper putter grip series, they have you covered. Best materials, best products, best selection. It is Golf Pride. All right, joining me now, they have done so much wonderful stuff. I would highly recommend, just as an aside, we're talking about a team competition. Their look at Cypress Point is one of the really most comprehensive things that I have seen historically. The images, the visuals, all of it is so wonderful. That's why their work is just next level. It is Fried Egg. He is the head of content for Fried Egg. Nice enough on a Labor Day. He'll be laboring with inflatables and trying to get folding chairs disassembled at the end of the summer. He, of course, Brendan Porath. Good morning.
Good morning, Gary. Good to be with you. You're on the nose. The bounce house is already set up right outside the window here, so we're going today.
Putting the bounce house back into that giant sleeve is one of the most disconcerting exercises on earth. God love you. All right, you're kind enough to carve out some time for me. I mentioned, look, from the first week of the year when you came on for the first time, it was mostly about Keegan. What are we even doing here? That culminates last week. I'll get a final thought from you on that before we wrap. But this is going to be primarily about the European kind of view of things, because Luke makes his picks top of the hour. Let's start with your level of surprise that he chose to do the encore. Were you?
No, I don't think so. I think you just outlined in the prior segment the great challenge of winning an away Ryder Cup. And we walked out of Whistling Straits here, the last home Ryder Cup for the U.S., wondering, does this need to be expanded beyond Europe? It's a 10-point blowout, in the way they expanded beyond Great Britain and Ireland when Jack Nicklaus called for that. Is this going to be competitive anymore? Where are they going to fill the ranks? Where's the next era of player coming from. And that was only 4 years ago. And then they come back, they lose a handful of guys, these stalwarts, to live, and they're removed from the process, whether it be as a player or in the captain's room. And there's so much uncertainty just 4 years ago. And somehow within that short time span, they've completely locked down the operation with continuity. And when you talk about going to win an away Ryder Cup, what a luxury it would be to have guys who have been in the arena. You want them in form. You don't just go for experience. You don't just go with the guy who's been there before if you can't, find the center of the club face. And they have this incredible luxury of going to an away game and the challenge that presents. And they haven't been close in over a decade now, with guys who are in form and guys who have been in the arena. And this will be an arena unlike any other, as we know. It's been hailed and promoted as it's going to be the biggest Ryder Cup ever. And the PGA of America's had it on the calendar for decades that way. What a luxury. Well, go with continuity, both continuity in the captain's room and continuity in the roster if it fits. And this time it fit. And there's really little drama, little angst here as he makes his picks this morning. So it will be 11 of 12, and you sub in one Højgaard for another, and you go. And I think it'll be it's as good of a setup, all the things you can control going into a Ryder Cup before the balls are in the air, and we know there's some unpredictability to match play. They're controlling everything they can, and it's worked out perfectly. You want continuity, and they have that both on the roster and in the captain's chair.
Brendan, the point you made, every team makes modest pivots or big pivots. And we knew a big pivot was coming from Europe because of all of those old lions that you mentioned. But those old lions always then transition to the back bench. They were ushered out of the system. So with knowing that and knowing they're 8-3 overall in this competition this century, and they have road wins in the last 2 decades, in 04 and then in 12, how have they done this? What is it? What do you have a theory as to why they are who they are?
You start to get into these airy-fairy, unsubstantive explanations, and that's always a danger with the Ryder Cup. Is how much stock are you putting in these narrative explanations? Is it all about the narrative? Are they playing for Seve? We understand Seve is this looming presence. Well, Rasmus Højgaard, I think, was 3 years old when Seve passed. They didn't really, Ludwig, Victor, they've replenished, but there is sort of this greater meaning, this greater motivation of whatever concoction they have created over, it's now been, since the mid 80s, right? And you outlined that first road win in 87 at Muirfield Village. It's sort of been a 4-decade process that you can sub in new names and players who probably never met Seve Ballesteros, but understand what that means and what they're following. And I don't know that always exists on the American side. I sometimes think there's a facile explanation of, well, the Europeans just care more, right? And the Americans are just driven by money and fame. I think that could sort of be a crutch that we lean on to explain the difference. And without making that distinction between the two sides, I think we can just highlight and spotlight really the meaning and program. You talk about a franchise, right? Well, it's building something decades over decades. And not in a Jerry Jones kind of way, where guys just hanging on for dear life. They have a program of sort of succession, right? And it's become Luke Donald's time. He's been in that program for 2+ decades, going back to the start of the century. He's seen what you can do at an away games, like you said, with Rose and McIlroy too, leading at the top, being there in 2012. So I think there's just something that defines the program decade over decade, and it can translate to an away win.
Jerry, I'm sorry that even Golf Channel on a Monday morning is not a safe space for you to not get sideswiped by Brendan Porath. Do you have any, or is there any misgivings about the continuity of the European side? I was pointing out, I reached out to Justin Ray. I said, well, when, if any, did we have this much from one team then representing the next team? And he pointed out it was Europe. 71, 73, that they brought 10 guys back from the 71 team to 73. They got boat raced in both. So he's getting ready to do something nobody's ever done. How could this not work out? Like, do you have anything that makes you think like there should have been a little bit more change?
No, I think you're trying to poke holes. There's certainly ways it's not going to work. I don't know that all their guys are in great form. We could talk about the top of the roster, Jon Rahm, Rory McIlroy. Are there questions around them? You might be trying to poke holes, but they haven't been. I know Jon Rahm won the individual title on Live, but he's not been in a real cauldron on a Sunday at a major besides Quail Hollow this year. It's been a couple of years for Jon Rahm. Rory McIlroy hasn't played his best, maybe struggled with motivation since the Masters. So there could be questions, but in terms of the actual roster construction, you're really picking nits when you want to look for new names for no reason at all. And I think continuity is the primary goal as you go into an away Ryder Cup. I think you're just picking nits when you look for other explanations of who to sub in new names. And there are worthy candidates, Matt Wallace, Nico Højgaard, Harry Hall. Those guys are worthy, but there's just really no decision to be made here. It's the 12 you go with from last time, subbing Nico Højgaard for Rasmus Højgaard.
Yeah, I share that sentiment, and even if you can say, well, Hovland's not kind of in the mind space or the head space he was, starting with the chip on his opening hole of the first match he played, and he's like, let me show you something. And then, Ludwig was, he looked like a rocket ship, and it's not like he's fallen off significantly, but at the same time with those two guys, and then you counter that with someone like Bob McIntyre, who's in a different place. He's a better player than he was a couple years ago, and he played well in Rome. And then even Fleetwood, who's got a wonderful Ryder Cup record, look, he couldn't be in a better place than he currently is. I'm with you that you're nitpicking in that respect. Who do you think has more depth? Knowing what we think we're going to know about the 12 on 12, is there a way for you to evaluate who has the advantage on depth and versatility?
I think the American side has more depth. I understand that maybe the European side has greater experience, but if you look at form, you look at talent, you look at ranking, whether it's world, data golf, whatever it is, the American side has more depth. There are questions there, of course. Xander's not having a good year. Patrick Cantlay hasn't been as good as he has been in recent years. There are questions on that side. But when you talk about the picks, look, they had 6, 7, 8, 9 guys for 6 spots last week, including the captain himself. And they went with 6 incredibly strong choices, both based on form, talent, and off ranking. And when you talk about depth, when you focus on depth and you put a guy like Cameron Young and Sam Burns are your very last guys coming in the last spots on the door through the back door, that's an incredibly deep roster. And they've just been in better form. When you look at the bottom of the European roster, on a pure question of depth, I think it is the U.S. side.
All right, let me ask you, because you and I have done this a handful of times, that the Keegan decision, and I've heard a number of people say they're not a better team because he's not on the team. He was one of the 12. I have my own answer to that position. Your viewpoint on him passing on himself and what it means in terms of whether they're better, weaker, stronger. What are they?
I mean, the better chance to win. I feel like this is sort of a hypothetical exercise if you're just saying they're a weaker team. Well, that removes the context of, oh, he's the captain and has to captain these 3 days. There's context there. So it's not just a 12 on 12 driving contest or skills challenge. There's context here, and the better team to win the Ryder Cup in 2025 is with Keegan Bradley as just the captain. Now, is he qualified on merit as to be in a running for a spot if he were not the captain? Of course, but that's not the reality of the situation. And so him passing on himself, I think it really had a motivating factor. Again, we're talking about narrative, ethereal factors here, but I think it will be a big motivation. I thought there was a lot of emotion And Sam Burns, who's pretty deadpan, right? He's
Yes.
as far as we know him publicly, just kind of a deadpan character. Really emotional last week, and Keegan, because they understand what it means to Keegan Bradley to play and how he's been working toward that for 12 years since Glen Eagles when they lost 2014, his last appearance as a player. They understand what it means for him to play, and then also what it means for him to pass on himself when he was a real viable candidate to have a spot. So I do think they are really well set up from the extra, whatever extra control, motivational factors you can control. They're really well set up by him bypassing himself. And that's the best case, best scenario going in to Bethpage, because you do have those guys at the end of the bench really moved, I think, with the meaning of Keegan passing himself for them.
You and I have been in lockstep on this. He's not a player in a vacuum. He would have been a player captain. And if you just want to say the player, I get it. But he's not. And the dynamics of him being all those other things is why I think it's something that if you want to have this conversation, you have to have it in total. You can't just look at his data and his merits. It's the other stuff, which is overwhelmingly a part of the narrative. Thank you, as always. Enjoy the Labor Day. I look forward to when the Ryder Cup comes and I see you. And that week, which is total chaos, will actually be a break in your life from what life will be as soon as all the activities begin in your household. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Gary. Really appreciate you having me.
All right, there's Brendan Porath, head of content for Friday. When we continue, Rob Lee's going to join me from Sky Sports, a two-time winner on the European Tour. His perspective on what Luke is getting ready to do here at the top of the hour. Nice to have you with us on this Labor Day. Wherever you are, enjoy the day. Hope it includes golf. We're back on Golf Channel right after this. Back in on this Labor Day Monday here on Golf Channel. Great to have you with us on 5 Club's top of the hour. Luke Donald's 6 captain's picks to fulfill and round out his European Ryder Cup team. And this segment is brought to you by Peter Millar. You can go to petermillar.com. The entire fall line is available to you there, including this little Bingham Performance Sport Coat. I know my next guest, he saw it and he said, I must have one of those, even though it's Labor Day and I can't believe you're wearing a suit and tie. I'm speaking of Rob Lee, contributor of Sky Sports, won a couple times on the European Tour / DP World Tour. His perspective as we head toward the top of the hour with Luke making his picks. Rob, my friend, thank you for taking the time. How are you?
Good, Gary. Yeah, beautiful sunshine here in London, West London. And yeah, I'm looking forward to when this is over, getting out there and in amongst it.
These are fun days. Look, we get all this build, and for whatever reason, I never get tired of it. I always find it interesting to talk about the process of us getting to this day. But let me go back to when Luke did this for the first time. He was a sub for the displaced Henrik Stenson, which is an interesting dynamic. And then he has his virtuoso, kind of perfect maestro performance, strikes all the right chords. What do you remember most that impressed you most about his first go-round as captain?
I think what Luke has in abundance is calmness. Now, if you're looking for a kind of Seve-like figure or an Ollie-like figure, that kind of a captain, that's not what Luke Donald is. But I think in these tricky golfing times, we hit the jackpot with him. And I've been super impressed with, his first captaincy. This is going to be his second captaincy. And again, we have got exactly the right bloke in exactly the right city to take the Europeans to New York and put on a show and maybe go against the grain of recent Ryder Cups and win an away match. Now, that's going to be very difficult. New York crowd on Long Island are going to be absolutely beside themselves with excitement. But if anyone can calm everything down and make that European team room really nice and placid, with the right bit of pep as well, it's Luke Donald. He's very impressive.
The ingredients to this, you mentioned this, going on the road. Jacqueline, the only one to do it, wins at home in '85, 40 years ago. goes back on the road in 87, wins for the first time on U.S. soil. And by the way, the win in 85 was by 5 points. That's how much Europe won by in Rome for Luke. Fellow Brit, there's some intangible little elements that you're going, my gosh, okay. But in terms of the secret sauce, Rob, as to what he has with this collection of players, overwhelmingly, who were his team in 2023, what do they possess that you think is so impressive?
I think people like Oberg and Sepp Straka, who stood in that Rome cauldron and stood up like men, like it was nothing to them. They were so super impressive. So now they come in here, not rookies. They've played a Ryder Cup. It's now an away leg. Yes, it's a very different experience, but they have the feeling of winning. And they do know that going to New York, of all the cities in the United States, is going to be the hardest gig possible. But Luke will be telling his guys, if you get off to a quick start, the New York crowd will eat their young. That's what's going to happen. If the Europeans get off to a quick start, it can quickly turn that crowd. If the Americans get off to a quick start, it's going to be a very difficult task to overcome that. So the start, the first day, the first session, which we're building up to, is going to be massively pressure-packed.
Yeah, you know, Rob, we showed a graphic at the start of the program in terms of, look, both sides have gotten off to good starts at home. Since 2008, the United States in day one has blitzed Europe. Now in 2012, Europe had the great comeback. We're showing it now. Last 4 U.S. hosted Ryder Cups, the United States led after day one collectively 21.5 to 10.5. Rob, if they get off to that type of a run, the place is going to be unhinged, and then the challenge becomes exponentially harder. So we go back to Luke and the steady hand. That's important. But the other part is the experience. How valuable it is that Rory is in his 8th trip to this competition. Justin Rose, 7th. And then you have a handful of other guys, Rahm and Hatton and Fleetwood, 4. And we expect Rahm to be on this time. And if Fitzpatrick, who I think is going to be picked, that's half your team playing at least 4 of those. Can that be helpful to stem the tide of an early disadvantage?
If there's anyone that can calm things down if the United States get off to a flyer, it is Luke Donald. And I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but he has the kind of placid, determined nature that you would want to look to as a captain, let's say at lunchtime on Friday before you go into the afternoon session, to work out how you can come back and reduce the deficit. If there's anyone that can do it, it's Luke Donald. And the Europeans are very lucky to have him in perhaps the most explosive away leg that we'll see in our lifetimes, this time in New York with the way golf is going. And I mean, I remember Brooks Koepka and Dustin Johnson in that duel at the PGA at Bethpage. And the crowd wanted Dustin to win. And this is them just shouting for one guy. I mean, it was overwhelmingly biased towards they're trying to get their guy, Dustin Johnson, over the line. And Brooks was just too strong and too good. But that was a New York crowd shouting for one guy. Imagine the New York crowd shouting for the entire dozen. The entire continent is being supported largely by the throng that is in New York. It is going to be eye-catching, explosive, all of these things. And if there's any person that's on the European side that can deal with that in a way that he knows how, it's Luke Donald.
It's so well said. I was there all week, and it wasn't just those 2 guys at the end. Some of the things I heard said to players who were exceedingly likable guys, disparaging things. I'm like, really? You just said that to Adam Scott? He's like one of the most wonderful people in golf. Yeah, you're right about that. Let me ask you about Rory. Rory is a global golf sports icon, but I still maintain that he's one of the lads. In this country, we say he's one of the boys. Is that still inherently true, that he is beloved and felt that there is investment that he has to the other 11 guys that is the same that it was in 2010, the first time he played in this thing?
Oh, 100%. Not only is Rory, I think, the most popular golfer that plays the game right now, but he'll be the most popular player. He will be looked at as someone who's going to be a leader in that team because of his experience and because of now being one of 6 players that's ever won a career Grand Slam. they will be looking to him, especially the younger guys. You know, Rory's the leader within the team. Incredibly popular with the public, incredibly popular with his teammates. Still as invested. Once he got the Ryder Cup, he's had that for his entire career. And he will be going to New York, I promise you, absolutely revved up to try and win an away leg in the Big Apple, which I know it's a hard task and it is going to be difficult. No one in the European side thinks anything otherwise, but totally invested and totally loved by his teammates. That has never changed.
No, and he is, you know, he's played with a lot of different guys. He had success with Fleetwood in Rome. You would expect that they, you know, reincarnate that again. The Keegan thing. Europe tried to bait Keegan into picking himself. You guys wanted it. Come on, Rob. You know that you wanted him on the side. So when he chose to pass on himself, what was your reaction in terms of what you think this means for the United States?
See, Keegan is kind of on a loser either way because he didn't pick himself. And if the United States lose, the noise will be, well, you didn't back yourself. You were one of the 12 best players that the United States could field, and you stepped aside and put someone else in your place, and you lost. If he picks himself and he loses, then he's on to a hiding again. Absolutely, bang by the book. He's going to be just, it'll be derision amongst people looking at Keegan Bradley. So I think either way, whichever way he goes, and there's a loss, he's going to come under some sort of a magnifying glass that he doesn't want to be under. I personally think, though, he is a really doughty match player. And I wouldn't like to play Keegan Bradley in a Ryder Cup match. I remember when he played with Phil Mickelson. It might have been at Medina, actually.
It was.
They were sensational for the first 3 sessions. They won 3 out of 3. Absolutely sensational. And Keegan gets it. And he feels, I think he's still carrying a chip from the last time when you could argue he should have been in the side. And I think that's why they gave him the captaincy, to kind of placate him a little bit, because he was hard done by. And now he's played well enough to get in the side and hasn't picked himself. It's difficult for Keegan. I love watching Keegan Bradley. I know he's fidgety and he's angsty and he's high tempo, but you know that adds and makes for great theatre. I wish he was playing, but I'm sure he'll be a great captain.
Yeah, I think in lieu of him playing, he'll do the Seve. Where in '97, I thought Seve was on every hole simultaneously of all 4 matches on Friday and Saturday and even Sunday. Rob, thank you so much for taking the time. Appreciate your perspective. I hope we can do it again before Ryder Cup week. Thanks.
Cheers, Gary. Take care.
Okay, there is Rob Lee, Sky Sports, multi-time winner on the European Tour. We come back. Some thoughts about what we think we're going to hear, starting with whether he starts with Jon Rahm or ends with him. The presumptive captain's picks from Luke Donald again. Coming up top of the hour right here on Golf Channel. We're back on 5 Clubs right after this. Monday edition of 5 Clubs here live on Golf Channel. Nice to have you with us. Enjoy your Labor Day. This segment is brought to you by Piners, the cradle of American golf. I know they're going to be busy on all 10 golf courses, all the restaurants. There is no better place to enjoy what they offer you on the course and off the course than the cradle of American golf. The captain's picks are coming up at the top of the hour. Luke Donald, who is, again, he's bringing the band back together. We can presume, I think comfortably, that 11 of the 12 are going to be different. And the only difference is the guy who had the same last name as the guy who was on the last team, who's not going to be on this team, Rasmussen for Nikolai. And again, if we go back and look at the captain selections made by European Ryder Cup captains starting in 1999, they've made good choices. And of course, they've had good partnerships. They have mixed rookies with veterans. And overall, since 1999, Team Europe has gotten excellent production from those captain selections, 60, 46, and 15. And the United States has a losing record. You can add those half points from all those halved matches that nudges that United States record up, and you could do the same for Europe as well. So Luke's going to make his picks. And when you start looking at who you think it's going to be, Jon Rahm is going to be chosen. Jon had a couple of very good performances in major championships from the U.S. Open, even more so the PGA. He was really in contention and then didn't take advantage of a couple holes, 14 and 15 at Quail Hollow, and he finished further back. He was still in the top 10. And if you look at data golf, Jon Rahm's one of the 5 best players in the world. Sepp Straka is interesting because Sepp, in terms of his production, has been as good as almost anybody outside of Rory on the European side, but he has not had the last, month or month and a half that's been very, very productive. And, he sat out a playoff event, and we don't know. That's the one kind of uncertainty I still expect, not knowing the nitty-gritty of that. And then beyond that, you're talking about Victor Hovland and Ludwig Oberg and Matt Fitzpatrick. These are guys, the average, throw out Jon Rahm's world ranking because it's skewed because of his live events. The average world ranking of those 5 other guys, it appears is going to be right around 20 officially in the world. Tomorrow, we will have full reaction because Johnson Wagner and Brendan DeYoung are going to join me. We'll examine what Luke Donald has chosen to do by bringing back all these guys from Rome. And then we will look at, in total, the rosters of the United States and Europe. Full recap on Tuesday here, but for now, coming up in just moments, Luke Donald, European Ryder Cup captain with his picks. Enjoy.